Greetings YouTube, Kudou here, and Craigslist is a magical place. Putting the right amount of money in the right hands can make anyone's dreams come true. This being the case, I managed to get my copy of Final Fantasy 15 2 days early. I'm about 10-12 hours into the game, so I'd like to give you my thoughts. Now, before we get started, I have to let you know, well in advance, that I am one of the filthy heathens who enjoyed Final Fantasy 13. It seems like a small deal, but I'm not one of the people going into this game looking for Square Enix to redeem themselves for Final Fantasy 13 because I actually enjoyed it. I feel like the thoughts you had on 13 are going to color the mindset you have when you're going into 15. And I'm just letting you all know right out the bat that I liked Final Fantasy 13. So let's talk story, guys. The story starts out pretty lightheartedly, before throwing you straight into the political warfare that you know is going to eventually come up. It actually throws you into a bit of like a tutorial island. Your main character Noctis is the prince of a kingdom called Lucis, and you're on your way to meet your bride-to-be. In the beginning, it's not made very clear exactly how well you know this girl, but you get to find out a bit more about that later on. This was a fairly genius idea on Square Enix's part. I feel like one of the reasons that Final Fantasy 13 didn't go over so well is because they tried to throw you into like one of the biggest, most important story sections of the game right in the beginning, and there's really no stakes, there's really nothing to gain or lose because you don't really know what's going on yet. Here it starts you out on a pretty nice sized map to explore, and there's not really any like urgency or anything that you necessarily have to do. It's just kind of going around, learning the controls, going on a few side quests, and pretty much just enjoying the game for a while. If you're worried at the beginning about how slow the game's going, don't be, okay? Around the second chapter, things will pick up pretty darn quick. As you may have expected, Final Fantasy 15 is the prettiest, technically speaking, game in the Final Fantasy universe. Being the first game actually developed for the PS4, this shouldn't come as a surprise. Technical aspect aside, though, I have to say that it's not quite as outlandish as Final Fantasy games have been. This is going to be a huge point of contention for fans, but just know going into this that the setting is very, very grounded. A lot of the beginning of the game is going to be spent in forests and deserts, and you're pretty much just going to be looking at very average stuff, with the exception of a few pretty awesome standout pieces. While I can see that the game is done very well on a technical level, I have to admit I sort of miss just how crazy some of the settings got in the other Final Fantasy games. I haven't beaten the game yet, so it's probably unfair to judge this game on a whole, but chances are you're not going to have a demigod come out of the sky, turn into a motorcycle, and then be a shirtless guy riding this demigod on a giant half-pike made of ice. Okay, I'm not going to say anything about good or bad, it's just if you're into the crazier sort of side of Final Fantasy, you're probably not going to get as much of it here, but if you don't mind it kind of coming back down to earth a little bit, then the setting is going to be perfect for you. Square Enix decided to go with an all-male cast of main characters this time, and before you pick up your Anita Sarkeesian banners of not enough female representation in games, I feel like the main cast was actually made more to appeal to women. The main character is pretty much just a cast of like reverse harem dating sim archetypes. You have your beautiful teenager who is angsty and just needs love. You have your big burly bodyguard type who could totally protect you in any situation but still knows how to laugh and smile. Your British butler servant type who has just the most delicious accent. And the small annoying energetic one that will either make you want to choke him in his sleep or you'll squee every time he does something adorably obnoxious. Honestly, I don't even want to talk about the genders because I don't think it matters in the slightest, but I know somebody is eventually going to throw in their review that Square Enix released an all-male cast in 2016 when this is supposed to be the age of feminism. And I'm telling you guys, if you actually look into the characters a little bit, this game can totally appeal to women, no problem. It'll probably appeal to female audiences even better than male audiences, despite the all-male main cast. Speaking of which, the camaraderie between the four main characters is actually really good. Lately, JRPGs have been playing up their archetypes to a sort of heavy, almost like layered level where if you have a big burly guy, he's always serious and always focused on the mission. And if you have the snooty British type, he's always sarcastic and always ready to make a joke at your expense. Governor. Sorry, guys, I don't do accents. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is everybody's really well balanced. Even though they all have very defined character traits, it's not like they have one or two traits that just define everything about their personality, and they come out and surprise you a few times. The game features dialogue options, and in one of the earlier missions, you actually have the option to tell somebody that's requesting a favor of you that you'll only do it for money. And you would think that picking a choice like that would turn your team on you, but actually somebody brings up after you make that decision, yeah, I'm really glad you asked about the money. I was afraid you were going to try to do this for free. They're all four just really down-to-earth, well-rounded characters, and I really dig that. I also want to say that the English voice acting cast is fantastic. When the game's story actually picks up, and you're not just sort of in the tutorial area doing side quests and stuff, and you actually get some heavier moments, Noctis's voice in particular, oh, mwah, Noctis's English voice actor nailed it. And I'm sorry if you're a really stuck-up otaku who only listens to Japanese voices, but the English voice cast really knocked it out of the park with this one. One last bit about characters. So Cindy from the demo, a lot of people were complaining about how she was a little bit too sexualized, and I want to talk about her for a second. Not only is she just as sexy as she was in the demo, but I think they made her even sexier. I'm going to catch some flack for this, but this is a pretty small victory for people who are opposing video game censorship right now. The honest to God's truth is sexy women are allowed to exist in video games. If that's what they want to put in the games and people enjoy it, then there's nothing wrong with it. If one character model is going to ruin an entire game for you, then let's be honest, you honestly weren't that big of a fan to begin with. I'm going to soapbox here for a second, so bear with me. I think instead of going crazy over the fact that there's sexy women in this game, I think what feminist journalists should try to do is acknowledge that there are sexy guys in this game as well. Just enjoy the hot characters, guys. It's okay for them to be hot. We'll talk about how cute Cindy is. You guys can talk about how cute Ignis is. And that's us connecting over the game, sharing personal interests in the game. We can all share the sexy characters together, and that's the important thing here. Trying to fight against them and trying to have them removed from gaming is just going to separate us, and that's not what we need right now. If you are opposed to it, at least just oppose to it respectfully. It's not your thing. You kind of wish she wasn't quite as dolled up as she is. That's completely fine. But don't make such a huge deal out of this that people don't really want to be around you anymore, and then tell us it's our fault for not wanting to be around you when you're just calling us sexist misogynistic for thinking that a gaming character is cute. Is this really where we are right now? I feel like it is, and that makes me really sad. It's not Cindy's job to represent your entire gender, okay? She's hot, she's just one female, pixelized character, that's it. Get over it. And I'll just step off of my soapbox for a second. Sorry guys, that took up a lot more time than I was expecting it to, but I'm not going to edit any of it. I'm going to keep it all in. Let's talk about gameplay. So obviously the first thing we have to talk about is the battle system, and this is going to be a sticking point for some people. So the battle system is still really flashy. That's one thing I'll have to say for it. It's a really cool looking battle system. It's kind of like if you took Kingdom Hearts and cranked it up to 11. Just imagine your Valor form Sora from Kingdom Hearts 2 all of the time. The way the basic combat structure works is you have an attack button and a defense button, and you hold the attack button and your character automatically starts attacking whatever it's targeting, and you can let go of it and start pushing the defense button in, and you'll dodge all incoming attacks. So you kind of have to switch between circle and square to be on offense and defense accordingly. You can also time your defense button to block an attack and then parry the enemy back for pretty massive damage. It gets a bit deeper with skills, twin link attacks, and teleportation, but That's the basics that you need to know. You can also use the D-pad to switch between different weapons. You can have up to 4 weapons equipped at a time, and you can switch your weapons out mid-combat if you notice that an enemy is weak to something else. So call me a casual if you want to, but there's this other combat mode you can do called wait mode. And wait mode is really awesome because if you stop touching the controller, then time freezes and you can cycle through enemies, check weaknesses, and actually plan ahead. People argue that this makes the game too easy, but in my opinion, it doesn't really make the game easier, it just makes it more strategic. Like, honestly, let's be real, guys, okay, let's be real. If you get overwhelmed by enemies, what you're going to do is you're going to mash the circle button and then put some parries in there every once in a while. I find that using wait mode takes the button mashing out, and you can just target enemies, check weaknesses, and then just kill an enemy, plan for the next enemy you're going to go after, and just do it that way, and it just feels better for me. I recommend at least trying it out, and if you really do think that it slows the combat down too much or makes it too easy, you can switch it right back at any time. It just feels like Square Enix is having a hard time bringing, like, difficulty and strategy back into the Final Fantasy universe, but I guess it kind of lives on in Dragon Quest and Bravely Default, so switching to the more action-based style is kind of okay, especially for how spectacle-y the game is. As far as exploration goes, have you played a little game called The Witcher 3? I know that's a weird comparison to make, but this game feels almost exactly like The Witcher 3 to me, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. You get pretty good-sized maps to explore. If you talk to the diner owner of certain places, then they'll open up spots on your map and show you where different treasure and stuff is located. If you go to a place with treasure or a mining area or some place that has something to collect, then it'll gray it out on your map. Here's a quick tip for everybody. That's going to come back eventually. So if you're trying to 100% a map, it's not going to actually happen. Just collect stuff as you go. Don't go out of your way to collect too much stuff. There are also lots of side quests and stuff. The hunting quests are going to be the main ones you're going to go after because they give a lot of experience, a lot of money, and they're a lot of fun to do because normally the monsters you're hunting are like 3 or 4 levels higher than you, which makes the battles more intense. You can also find a lot of side quests just randomly out in the world. I was really excited about this at first, but it normally boils down to either giving somebody a repair kit or healing somebody with a potion. But the actual side quests are really good too. The last bit of gameplay I want to talk about is driving the car. So, you now can drive to get from place to place. Don't expect anything too deep with this though. So, you have 2 options. You can either drive the car yourself, in which case, you are locked on the road, you can't go off-roading, you can't really bump into other cars or anything. You pretty much just hit the accelerate button to go down the road you're on, and then you turn left or right at intersections. Or you can have your retainer, Ignis, drive the car for you, and you just mark a place on the map and let him go. This sounds pretty boring at first, but the world looks really nice, and you can sort of mess with the radio, and your characters will have conversations, and they do their best to make it as entertaining as possible. Now, all of this changes at night. At nighttime, all of the really big, nasty things that can one-shot you come out. So, Ignis actually refuses to drive for you at nighttime unless you're going back to a town to rest up. When you fight monsters and you get experience, the experience is collected up, and then when you go to sleep for the night, you get to divvy out the experience. You can also eat food to get buffs, so on and so forth. Pretty much what I'm trying to say is you want to go to sleep at night and only explore during the day, but sometimes you'll have to go out at night as well. The game is really big and there's a lot to explain, but those are pretty much the basic things you need to know, so I'll go ahead and stop it there and let you explore the rest of it for yourselves. In conclusion, I'm really impressed with Final Fantasy XV and how it turned out. I don't think it's quite as unique or imaginative as some of the other entries have been, like Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy XIII, but I feel like the more grounded approach lets Square Enix really work on the technical aspect of their games. There's nothing really too intense going on, so they really kind of tightly packed in the combat and the graphics and the story and the pacing in particular. If you're not only a Final Fantasy fan, but also a fan of more Western RPGs, if you like doing side quests, grinding, hunting monsters, and you will generally just try to get the most out of this game that you possibly can, then I give this game a worth it price of its full $60. There is a lot of stuff to do. If you're just a JRPG fan and you're probably just going to buy this game, only go through the story and kind of skip around on the side quests, then I'd probably give this game a worth it price of $50. Because if you're not doing the side quests and stuff, you're actually cutting out like half of the game. If you're a Final Fantasy snob who believes wholeheartedly that the series is dead and you're looking towards this game to have it replenish your faith in Square Enix, then I gave this game a worth it price of about $35. I'm sorry guys, but I don't think this game is going to quite scratch the itch that Final Fantasy fans have been trying to get scratched by Square Enix. If you're looking for hardcore, dedicated JRPGs, Bravely Default 2, and the Dragon Quest series on the 3DS, okay? It's not happening here anymore.